Hi, everyone. Welcome to Career Composer. My name is Erin Ahart. I am a full-time career coach at a top university here in Washington, D.C. And today I'm here with my friend, Abby Weaver. I'll spoil it. We are talking about layoffs today. The title of today's episode is 24, Laid Off Twice, and Absolutely Thriving because Abby is so amazing. I'm so excited for Abby to share her story with us. I'm so inspired by her confidence and her optimism as she's navigated this entire process. And the purpose of today's episode is really to allow Abby to share her story in hopes that it might help someone else who's anticipating a layoff, who's currently going through this themselves, or who's just curious to hear about someone else's experience and how they handled it. What is it even like to be laid off? We are going to hear all about that today. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok to stay up to date on all things Career Composer. And if you really enjoy this episode, please give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to your podcast. It really helps this podcast grow so we can keep giving you the career content that you want. And without further ado, let's get into it with Abby.
Hi, guys. I'm Abby. I'm a 2022 Elon University graduate. I'm originally from the Maryland area, so local to the DMV. And I'm so excited to be here and talk about my work experience. And yes, as Erin said, I've been laid off twice, but obviously that does not define my entire experience and is also a lot more common than I think I realized. So hopefully this reaches someone out there who feels like that it's really scary and they need a little bit of support, because I definitely could have used it my first time going through it.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We are so thankful to have you on the podcast. I'm so grateful to you. But why don't we start off? Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? You already shared a little bit, but tell us about yourself and start to share your story.
Absolutely. I majored in strategic communications at Elon University with a triple minor in leadership studies, sport management, and Spanish.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, very busy. I loved my time there, but knew I wanted to come back to the DC area and was fortunate to accept a full-time position prior to graduating. So I accepted a position in April, moved up here in May of 2022, and was at a tech company for just under a year in a HR recruiting type role, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, it was my first full-time big girl corporate experience, so lots of learning, and I am really grateful for that company and all the people and mentors that were there. As is tech, they went through some rough periods, and I know the economy also, doesn't help with that depending on what time of year we are. And actually, one of my coworkers on the recruiting team got laid off first.
Wow. Okay.
And that was super emotional for me, just knowing someone, by proximity who also got laid off and just was no longer there one day. Like, we had to work on their work and distribute that so that the train kept moving. But it's almost as if we didn't talk about it. Like, after it happened, it was very hush hush. And, not that there's too much to say, I guess, but this person was an integral part of the team, and it was really sad when they left. And I made sure to reach out and, personal phone and meet up with them and make sure they were doing well. So, this was also December. So holiday time, just a lot of emotions.
Sucks.
It did suck. Yeah. And I am grateful to say I'm so close with this person. So, and they're doing really well in a new role. And it's just nice to know that if you put in the effort, you can definitely stay close with people, even if it's maybe not speaking about them at that current company, but in your own time, in your own ways. And some of my other coworkers did the same. We all hung out like as a group, and that's not for everybody, but if it's someone important to you, you should definitely keep them close.
Yeah, that's great, because whether people are laid off or they leave voluntarily from a company, we spend so much time at work, and sometimes those people, while they might be work friendships, they really feel like such an important part of our lives.
Totally. So much time at work you don't realize until you're not there. Crazy to just not be there anymore. And whether it's like in the physical space or just emotionally close with people around you that sit next to you, or you're emailing all day, sending messages to, like on Zooms, on the phone with. So definitely rocked my world as being a 23-year-old who had never experienced anything like that. And also gave, red flags and warning signs that this could happen again. And spoiler, sure enough, it did. I was laid off on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So only a few months after the initial layoffs had happened. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, those aren't things you can predict. I definitely had anxiety about it and was kind of told, like, there's nothing to do. And I think that's another piece of advice or just information that is helpful now on the other side. Like, obviously, you can worry about it. You can make yourself sick over it, but that's anything in life. And you don't know until you know. Like, those 3 months were very hard for me. I was very anxious and almost like I was awaiting it. And it did end up happening, which wasn't good reinforcement for my mental health. However, I enjoyed my time at that company. And, I maybe do wish that I had lived it less in fear. It's nothing personal. So when it did happen to me, the first person I immediately called after my mom was this coworker that had been laid off in December. I knew they had just gone through it. So I knew that this person would be a very helpful resource. And indeed they were. And I felt very grateful to be able to talk to somebody who had literally just gone through it. So not sure my experience would have been the same if I had not had that person.
What was the difference between the first time you were laid off and the second time?
Great question. So after I was laid off, I was very emotional. It was very, very difficult for me to have self-confidence and feel like I didn't bring this upon myself because, of course, layoff versus being fired are two completely different things.
Right.
I think sometimes people use those words very interchangeably in our society, and it's quite frustrating. And to the extent I'm comfortable, I correct that person. I think it's important, the distinction, because it really gives the power and ownership back to the person who was laid off because they did not do anything wrong. It was just a shift in the organization, and sucks, but it's not personal and it's not a reflection of your work. It never is. So I think that is something that I've built within myself, but at that time was definitely not there. And I was definitely hard on myself. I was frantically looking for new jobs within hours of learning that I was laid off.
That's crazy, though.
Was like on LinkedIn. I was so stressed because I pay for my apartment rent. I have things I need. I was 23 and not with a job or in school full time for the first time ever. Like, I always had a plan and a purpose, and not to say if you don't have a job, you don't have a purpose, but it felt like that for me at that time. Very frantic. Definitely would not recommend that. Another piece of advice, take your time. Those resumes I submitted and maybe even cover letters, it's hard to say, it was such a whirlwind, were probably so not well done, half-assed. I don't know if we can curse on this podcast.
Gosh. Okay. Yes, we can.
I was hesitant to say that, but totally half-assed. Totally not my best work and not a reflection of who I am. It's too bad, obviously, that I rushed it because now, those few companies might have the wrong impression. However, I would definitely say, despite the feeling of like, I need the next job, to take your time, review your materials, meet with a career advisor, whether at your university or as an alumni. I think all of our personal networks, we know somebody who's really locked into this game, so you can definitely reach out to them. I took some time. I met up with this person that had also been laid off for advice and brought our laptops to Tate and Clarendon and just kind of had a career resume job search sesh together for a few hours. And it was awesome to not be doing it alone. It felt very safe and like the camaraderie I had. So once again, very grateful, sad that this happened to two people, but also grateful to have a shared experience so directly. So hopefully if you don't have a shared experience and you're going through this can count as that. And, I see and hear you. Yes, I was able to find a new role within 2 months of my layoff. So
after the first time.
After the first time, yes. So I got another HR type job, but this time at a law firm, which was obviously a new space for me. And I worked there for 2 years. I originally actually was a temporary / contract worker. So that's another, thing I didn't even know was an option or an opportunity. And it's not for everyone. Obviously, if you need more stability or if you have a family and other people to support, maybe, contract temporary isn't for you. But for me at that time, being 23 and, only really needing to support myself, I could take that risk. And it did work out. After 6 months, I was converted full time. And I think I worked really hard in those first 6 months to prove myself, probably harder than I would have, of course, if I knew it was full time to begin with. Actually, part of the story is that I had 2 job offers, which is such an amazing position to be in, to be able to leverage yourself. I ended up picking the one that was contract and not full time.
Really?
Yes, because I thought it would be a better career move and I thought it would be the right move for me. It was risky. And once again, you might not have the luxury of taking that risk, but I did and I don't regret it.
That's such a good point. And there are so many different kinds of jobs out there. It sounds like the contract role allowed you to have that career advancement that you were looking for. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's nothing wrong with being laid off at all. It says nothing about you. The fact that you had 2 different job offers that you were deciding between a few months after you were laid off the first time just shows it wasn't a you problem.
Thank you. Yes,
yeah.
it definitely built my confidence back. Yeah, I had no idea that contract positions were even available in human resources type fields. And they're actually very common at law firms to be able to get your foot in the door. And then if it's the right fit on both ends, you stay longer. I actually started at this law firm 2 weeks before another coworker, another contractor did, and this person also got converted. So we kind of lived the same experience, and it was once again nice to do it with somebody just like at the previous organization. So yeah, that was the first time. And then as Erin alluded to, I was laid off a second time, most recently in May. So just around 2 years at this organization. And this one was a little more unexpected.
Okay.
This one was a little quieter and also a little more politically involved.
Yeah.
And so, as Erin said at the beginning of the podcast, we're based in DC, and I know that so many of you, read the news or just see on social media, lots of changes have been happening in DC since January. So yes, this organization was impacted by that, and therefore my job was. So it's definitely tough because this is a lot more easy to pinpoint than the first time. First time was the economy and tech and, so arbitrary, so hard to blame anyone or anything. It's just happens. However, the second time feels a lot more personal and feels a lot more targeted, honestly. And so many folks in DC have been laid off, whether it's a government position or not, because I worked in the private sector and also faced that. So I feel bad and feel empathetic for all those folks, but also knowing that, once again, not our fault.
I love that you're sharing this. And clearly, Abby and I are staying positive. And Abby, I'm just so inspired by your positivity, having gone through this at such a young age. And I've said that to you multiple times now, but I really mean it. It's really important that you're sharing this and how that layoff was connected to the broader context that we live in right now, because the job market is not great, guys.
Hate to say
if you saw if you saw the July BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics report that came out, it wasn't looking good. But DC, in our own little bubble, it's even worse. And this is a very real experience for us. Like on the news, maybe you live in a different part of the country, you might hear that these layoffs are happening in DC. The layoffs are happening at the federal government level, but because so many of our friends work for federal contractors, when the layoffs and changes happen at the federal level, those changes also happen at the contracting level because of all of these different labor shifts.
Yes.
And when people in both of those groups and people who work in the private sector, like Abby worked in, when all of those people now don't have a job, they are flooding the private sector and other industries, specifically in the DMV area, especially if they've lived here all their lives, they've had a career in the government, or people like us moved here at a young age to pursue opportunity in the city like so many people do. Now, all of those people are flooding these other industries in this area. And just to share even more and provide context, as a career coach, when I look at these jobs on LinkedIn, there will be jobs posted in DC, Northern Virginia, and in Maryland, which we call the DMV. And all of the jobs in this area that I've seen, here's the difference. 2,100 people have clicked apply. I know 2,100 is a really specific number, but it's like that just over 2,000 mark on LinkedIn where it says, 2,300, 2,100, 2,000 people clicked apply on this job posting. when I look at very similar roles in Philly, because I'm from Pennsylvania and I use that as another city to kind of compare the market to, while there are fewer openings in Philly for those jobs, 200 people clicked apply on LinkedIn.
Wow.
So that's also another testament to you like navigating this industry, and we'll kind of share your exciting news later in the episode today. But the fact that you are being successful in your job search and you're doing this with grace, when that's how crazy the job market truly is right now. This is real. We're experiencing it, and Abby is freaking amazing for dealing with it. So
thank you. No, I mean, that's a great tip. I definitely, this most recent time, looked in other cities and considered the possibility of being young and not having roots and moving. And I did also notice how drastically different certain job markets are. And to Erin's point, if you're listening from, a different area and you're hearing these statistics about DC layoffs and it just doesn't feel personal because you're not from here, we can promise and attest that so many folks, I mean, we have a mutual friend who almost got laid off. Like, it's just so common, unfortunately. And I will also say not just young people, because I think there's a common misconception that it's like first in, first out,
right,
for people our age who are younger. However, I also know people who are older or further in their career and have also been laid off. And that can honestly be harder because, as I was saying to Erin earlier, if you're so segmented and specific in your career, because of course you've been working for many, many more years than we have, it's almost harder to find another job because you have such a specific skill set. In applying that to a new position can be a lot harder than us a few years out of college willing to try something new. For me, willing to go from recruiting to more general HR. And from there, you could even do other things. I mean, it's not necessarily a specific role that we're looking for. We're just kind of breaking our way into the industry. So I feel grateful that I'm able to try different things. And I'm doing, yes, as Erin mentioned, I accepted another full-time job.
Woo! Yay!
So very happy about that. It's been about 3 months since I was laid off. And so it's been a long time, but also it flew by, and I'm really happy in my new role. And there's a lot more business development type pieces and client relations. So once again, new to me, but I'm tackling it head on, and I'm grateful to be given the chance to do so.
Yeah, you're going to get a ton of leadership experience, which is amazing.
Yes, yay. I'm so happy. So
yeah. So I want to come back to a couple of things that you alluded to earlier. I definitely want to ask you more about like the emotional side, but you also mentioned the difference in how you applied for jobs when you were laid off the first time versus when you were laid off the second time. Yeah. I want to come back to the emotional and like mental health piece of it all later, because that so clearly impacts the way people go about applying for jobs. Yes. It's one of the biggest pieces that can make or break your job search is how you're doing mentally in that moment. But I want to know, if someone's anticipating a layoff, should they start searching for jobs? Should they, just kind of wait and see what happens and try and like keep their cool? Should they start applying for jobs when they're anticipating it? And if someone is laid off, how should they go about applying for jobs when that does happen?
Yeah, great question. I think it is good if you kind of have these warning signs and, spidey sense tingles that something is coming, and especially with the current climate, it might be clearer than in the past. So I would say, yes, definitely start applying or just kind of hedging your bets, looking around, informational interviews, talking with folks in your network that have jobs that one day you think you'd be interested in. I mean, that's not even necessarily applying or testing the waters. That's just learning more about what you want. So good to do at any point, but maybe if you're starting to get nervous or aware of something down the line, that would be a great place to start. I definitely did not do that the first time I had the warning sign that, a coworker had been laid off, and it kind of happened and I wasn't prepared. I mean, you never are. But the second time, with all the things going around in DC, I did start looking. Okay. I did start kind of being proactive because I knew that part of my job was doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And right now, a lot of those jobs are being cut, which I think
Mhm.
is so interesting and unfortunate because a few years ago, those were like the hot jobs.
Right.
Every company was adding a head of DEI, an inclusion chair, committee on DEI. So it's really interesting how quickly it shifted to cutting. And not only is it stopped, it's slowed, it's like no longer at a lot of organizations. So a testament to those that still have that. And I think when I was looking the second time, that was a really big thing for me, looking for companies that have not conceded, that have not taken steps back, that continue to fight for things that are important to me, and making sure those values align. Because at the end of the day, you're at work so often and you deserve to feel good about what you're doing. And, the second time, I also had a great experience and learned a lot, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. However, maybe that wasn't the company for me if those values of theirs don't align with mine. So maybe it was a wake-up call, a warning signal, but definitely being proactive is good. I mean, having a job is so much easier to get a new job versus not having one. But I think also a lot of organizations, once you're laid off, allow you to still say you work there. There's like a severance period and a moment of time where you can still, keep your LinkedIn active, keep your resume active. And that is obviously super helpful. If it's not a gap, I think a lot of people, look for those gaps. And I have gaps on my resume. And once you get on the phone with someone, have that initial screen and can explain, they'll understand. It's just that first, resume review at first glance. Why does Abby have 2 gaps? Why wasn't she working or doing anything for 2 months? And I do think LinkedIn has a feature where you can write, yes, what you were doing, whether that's a layoff, taking care of a family member, taking care of yourself, whatever it was. That is also super helpful if you need to assist yourself, if people are kind of making assumptions.
Yeah, that's a great point that I completely forgot about. That's a brand new feature that LinkedIn added.
Yes.
When you scroll down to your experience section at the bottom of your LinkedIn profile, you can add a gap in your experience and share why that gap happened.
Yes.
Yeah. And to your point, it's so much better to be honest about the fact that you were laid off than try and hide it. I've had experiences where I was on the hiring side and someone was fired, someone wasn't laid off, but they tried to cover up those gaps when they were fired from a role, and that raised a red flag. If you were laid off, companies appreciate that you're willing to be transparent with them, and especially if this is something that was completely out of Abby's control, there's nothing she could have done, and so just be honest with your employer.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely took me a minute to feel comfortable sharing that. The first time I got laid off, I was, considering, maybe I'll just say I'm looking for a new job and not really go into it. But, companies know that this happens and you don't have to go into specifics, obviously. And I think also sharing that you were laid off still shows that you are a fan of that previous company. There's no need to badmouth them or, especially because the next employer or recruiter doesn't want to hear you have bad blood with a former organization.
Exactly.
You want to speak highly. And I mean, I do genuinely speak highly of those experiences. I think every work experience, you learn and grow and get challenged. Definitely, being brief, just sharing that you're looking for a new opportunity because you were laid off or downsized or reorganization. There's lots of ways. I definitely looked up a lot of different ways to say the same thing. And usually people don't ask more questions. It's also not within, their purview to learn more about that. And yeah, speaking highly of the organization, this happened and admitting like I was laid off, but I'm still very grateful. And it was just what the company had to do at that time.
Yeah, exactly. It's really easy to say shame on the company and blame the company for discarding an amazing employee, but companies also have financial issues. They also have to save themselves. If you are the head of a company and you're about to go down the drain, you're in a financial crisis, sometimes there are very limited options and steps that CFOs and CEOs can take to save their business that they built. So that's also something just to keep in mind. It's not always personal. It's not always about you. I want to go back to the mental aspect because I've said multiple times now that I'm so impressed about how positive you've stayed.
Thank you.
So how have you been able to keep that positive mindset?
I think for me, definitely the first time I got laid off was a lot harder. Definitely, I've spoken about self-doubt and not feeling accomplished and feeling as if I brought this upon myself, thinking about all the things I did in that year and could I have done better? Could I have helped the team more? Was I not communicating well enough? But once it's done, it's done. And I think the second time, the fact that it's happened twice is no good. However, being able to compare those two experiences, pretty fresh experiences in my life, and seeing how much easier it was the second time, I think that's with anything. Any new, negative experience is so hard to deal with, whether that's grief or, breakups or whatever it might be. It sucks the first time. It just is awful and you feel awful and it takes a lot of time to bounce back, but you do. And if it happens again, if you lose another family or friend, another family member or friend, if you get broken up with again, it doesn't suck as much the second time. It's still like, oh, I remember this feeling, but the second time is less painful. So yeah, it was wonderful, honestly, to be able to experience it again. I mean, obviously, I don't recommend getting laid off. However, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And I was able to compare those two and I handled myself a lot better. I did not cry immediately. At some point I did, but I think within, minutes of hanging up the first time, I was in tears. I was so upset with myself. But the second time I was kind of like, damn.
Sucks for them.
Sucks. Yeah. I was like, shoot, I have to do the job process again. That's no one's favorite thing to do. But there was not as much emotional, which also told me that maybe it was time to move on because, crying and being so upset the first time, clearly I felt like it was the right culture fit. I was doing well. I enjoyed the people I worked with. But the second time not being as emotional, clearly something wasn't, right. And I'm a very headstrong person. And I would say maybe a little stubborn.
Me too.
So I was going to say,
Me too.
I see Erin and I have a lot of fun similarities like that. But I think I was putting up with a lot at work and, maybe not giving myself enough credit or saying, you know what, at this point, I deserve better and I should look elsewhere because I kind of was like, I can keep proving to myself that I can take it and I can, rise to the occasion, but you don't always have to. A few times, yes, there's going to be uphill and challenge at work, but if you feel like it's happening all the time or more often than it should, and, you'll know the feeling, then it might be time to concede, honestly. And that was a new concept. And I honestly don't think I would have. I think I would have kept killing myself at this former job unless something like this happened, unless they were the ones and it was not voluntary. I would have just stuck it out.
So something else that you had shared with me in a separate conversation was how you were spending your time when you were laid off. Obviously, you're hopefully applying for jobs, whoever you are listening to this, if you've been laid off. But what were you doing in that time since you didn't have a job?
Yes, thank you for giving me the chance to speak about that. Kind of related to the mental health. I did a lot more the second time being laid off for myself. I think the first time I was rushed with jobs. I was so pressed to be employed again. And I also didn't consider things like part-time work. The second time I was like, maybe this is a moment I'm supposed to slow down. I'm not supposed to rush into something. I'm going to take my time and explore what I like and figure out what makes sense for me. So the second time I looked at part-time work and I found organizations close to me and that I was interested in, and especially places that I was already a customer and I liked going there. And I thought to myself, I would like being there. I would like working there. So I did some of that. I put out some of those job applications, which was also very different because I was very used to, the more corporate full-time, but applying for part-time work is its own challenge. I didn't realize I don't have too much retail experience. So I think some people are very qualified for a 9 to 5 and are not very qualified for part-time customer service work. It does not translate necessarily. And there's a lot to learn and a lot of literal heavy lifting. So, being prepared for that. But I did accept a part-time job at a local beer and wine shop, which has been really fun. And
Nice.
yeah, I love interacting with community members, and it's woman-owned, and just all the stars were aligning. So when I was laid off, I was able to work, shifts during the day. And I think they were really happy to have someone who was free from 9 to 5. And that worked out well too, to get some extra money as I transitioned. But the other really exciting thing I did was travel. And this is something I thought about the first time, but very briefly, like it never came into actuality and didn't happen. But the second time I did make it happen, and I went to Europe for about 10 days by myself, and I met a group of strangers there, but it was incredible. The company is G Adventures. I would definitely recommend. They have programs all over the world, and I picked this one specifically because it was for 18 to 35-year-olds. So people like me and Erin, and, people who were nurses or teachers or, starting a new job actually, and just needed to go somewhere and do something, and very adventurous people. And that's not usually me. I'm very planning months in advance, and it's hard for me to, bite the bullet and try something new. But I told Erin that I was accepted and applied for this trip a week or two before it left. So
Wow.
super last minute, super not like me, but super spontaneous and fun. And I felt so grateful to be there and to have the means and financial stability to be there despite what was going on. And also just kind of living in the moment and not, I'll go to Europe once I get a new job, or once this happens, or you hit this milestone. You deserve it right now. If you're able to, and I had unlimited time, obviously, it felt like, why not now? We went to Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, and Austria, and it was incredible. And I definitely came back feeling refreshed. I think I'd done some, of course, job searches before I went, but coming back was I was so much more determined and felt so much more motivated to do so because I'd given myself that rest and that enjoyment and time off. And fun fact that I told Erin is that one of the people on my trip of 12 people from across the world, people from Australia, England, Canada, Spain, and the United States, one of the other people who was from Boston, this person had also been laid off and had also decided to go to Europe to refresh themselves and get back into the job search. So I knew that it was the right decision when this person had also gone through it and had also been laid off because of current administration.
I mean, you have probably heard this phrase, it's not rejection, it's redirection. And I fully believe the universe was telling you, it's time for Abby to go to Europe.
Yes.
It's time.
Absolutely. It's time for Abby to take a break and find something different and see how that works for her.
Yeah. I mean, in our 20s, I know you said you were looking at jobs not just in this location that we live in, but in other cities. It is the perfect time to just do something crazy, like going to Europe with a group of strangers who you've never met. Clearly, through a program. I know another program I've heard of is Education First. I think the age group is also 18 to 30.
Yeah. Yes. I've done one of those a long time ago.
Oh.
So, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, why not? If you have the savings, why not? I haven't been to Europe since 2018. It was my senior year of high school.
Wow.
And I was in Spain for 10 days. But ever since then, I've been thinking about, okay, is this the year I'm going to go back? I know I need to plan this for the future because it's just something that I really want to do. I've always wanted to go to Ireland because I am Irish, but I also really want to go to Italy because, again, with experiences that we've gone through in our 20s, we're dealing with these layoffs and the crazy job market right now. I was supposed to study abroad in Florence, Italy, and then COVID hit.
Oh my gosh.
I had applied for that program and then COVID hit. So listen, I know I'll get my chance at some point, but this is very inspiring to hear that you got to go and it was so amazing for you.
Yes, it was incredible. And I think also since I was considering moving, I told myself if I can do 10 days somewhere new and still make friends and still feel comfortable, then I could move. It was also almost a test to myself. I ended up accepting a full-time job here in the DMV area. However, I passed my own little test. I definitely felt like I knew myself well enough and I had the confidence and ability to go somewhere new because I know how daunting that is. And since my family is from this area, it would be, a huge restart. But I was proud of myself for proving I could do it if that was something I decided to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A couple other things that I would love to ask you about. One of the things that you mentioned to me and that you started to share with this other person who was laid off, who really helped you and was a mentor to you as you navigated this yourself. How have you navigated changing relationships between companies that you were laid off from or other people who you had known at work who might have left voluntarily? Just like in our 20s, we're changing jobs a lot. That's the nature of growing in your career. And it feels like we can make such amazing friendships at work. But then when you change jobs, it's like, are these my real friends? How do I maintain these relationships? So could you speak more on that?
Absolutely. This one I'm still navigating. This one I feel is fresher and also harder because it continues to ebb and flow. It's not like a one size fits all answer, but my experience is that making friends at work is obviously very natural. We were saying earlier how much time you spend there, how it's also really beneficial if you're close with your coworkers because then things become more efficient. People are more likely to loop you in on things if they like talking to you. And, a work happy hour or hanging out with coworkers outside of the working hours is also really nice to be able to learn more about their lives and what's important to them. I think that translates quite well. And as someone who's done work in engagement and bringing coworkers together with that purpose in mind, I've seen it happen. I've seen people who had no idea who this other person was because, they didn't sit near them and they were new, or it's just such a large organization that you might not have been introduced. As soon as you make that connection, now you've got, work together with them. Now you'll remember that person when you need X thing that they specialize in. So it's really exciting to see that, gap bridge, or maybe they didn't even realize they went to the same undergrad.
Right.
Little things like that go a really long way in building someone's network. However, I do think I use this phrase sometimes when I speak about my layoff experience, I flew a little too close to the sun and I got too attached and I got this mindset that my work friends were like my best friends. And obviously you might find someone at work who is genuinely your best friend and that's lovely, but I don't think that was this experience. I just had false sense of closeness. And I think you said earlier, like, that's my work friends. Like, that's a very situational person who can be super wonderful and super great, but you know them in the context of work. And not all the time does that translate to life. And that's very hard for me to accept, because when you think you know someone super well, and then all of a sudden you don't see them anymore, and it's up to the two of you to plan and make that happen, whether it's them or yourself, it might not happen. Like you guys might not be motivated to hang out like you used to. And I mean, I use hang out loosely because at work you're working. So you're not even really hanging out. You're just chatting.
Yeah. If they are real friends and you're moving to a new city, for example, or if something happens in your job or anything happens in life, there's no need to like have that scarcity mindset and worry about it, because if they're real friends, then that relationship is going to continue. The dynamics of the relationship will probably change. Are you talking to this person on the phone now instead of catching up with a coffee during a break at work? You're probably going to see them maybe once or a couple times a year if you live in a different city now. I think just be ready when you have that change at work or someone else leaves the workplace to just kind of let it be and see what happens. But I think it's a totally different situation when you or someone else gets laid off too, because there's that insecurity almost that you would feel. I have never been laid off, but I would feel all kinds of ways if I were laid off. You would hope that you would keep those friendships, and that's like a double whammy if you get laid off and your relationships change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think also for me, the emotional piece of staying close with someone that still works there.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's also super weird, because as a friend, of course I support and want the best for you in your career, but there are fresh, real emotions of like, man, like this is crazy and I don't want to hear about like this organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to know, you know, if I'm catching up with Erin, I do want to ask like, how's work? What's going on? What's new? Those are normal things that come into conversation. But now that you're talking about somewhere I used to be and things are happening while I'm not there,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I kind of, and if it's a real friend, I draw a line and I say, hey, I just don't want to hear about that right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I think while it's fresh in those first few weeks, months, that's totally valid. I mean, you could keep that for years, but now that I'm employed elsewhere, or even just with the part-time job, with the travel, once I kind of recentered and found myself again, I'm happy to hear about it. It's just fresh is really hard because I don't want to know. Like, I truly just don't need to know. Where you work is not everything about you. I would love to catch up and hear all the other great things. But yeah, that was definitely weird to have to be with people. I think actually that first time it happened, the next day was a St. Patrick's Day party that I was invited to
Oh my gosh.
at one of my former coworkers' places. And I was so highly considering not going because I just felt so uncomfortable and insecure, and I would have to show face and probably talk about it because it was so recent. And I did end up going. People were very gracious and, you know, said that they were sorry that this has happened. But then we moved on and had a lovely St. Patrick's Day and drank beer and hung out. So
yeah,
a lot bigger in my head than it actually was. But I understand if, you know, you do need space and want to take a break. But then, of course, on the flip side, you leave and you still want to be close with somebody and maybe they're not responding that much and, you know, they're putting less effort in. It's because they were your work friends. They weren't your real friends. And that's nice. And you still wish them the best, but you kind of, yeah, just take inventory, I would say, of your circle and your people. And it's actually funny too. I'm now closer with someone who I used to work with at this second organization. I am closer now since I've been laid off. So lots of things can surprise you throughout the journey. And that's because it's a testament to this person who's checked in on me and stayed up to date with me and invited me to things and clearly made it a priority that I'm a priority in their life. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, that's great. And you're totally allowed to take some time and like not want to talk about work. That doesn't make you like a bad person.
No,
it doesn't. Like, you've just gone through this traumatic experience, so it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they can talk about all the other things. And if all they have to talk about is work, then maybe
probably,
they're not that good of a friend, you know?
Yeah,
like
then they are just a work friend.
Then they are just a work friend. That's the only thing you guys have in common. So it's very weird too. It's like a mind trip when you're outside of it. Because obviously when you're there, you're like, we have so much in common because you guys work in the same department or you sit next to each other or, you know, this person was rude to both of you. So therefore it feels very shared.
Yeah.
When in fact that would have happened whether you were there or not.
Exactly. What was the most difficult part of being laid off? And maybe what's something that really surprised you that you haven't already mentioned?
I would say most difficult is probably just picking yourself back up again. I mean, I've talked a lot about how the second time was easier, but by no means do I mean it was easy. It was just easier than that first time because of how difficult and, as you said, traumatic it was. So definitely the emotional piece, the self-confidence piece for me was very difficult. I also think financially, it's very difficult to have to feel like you're scrambling and have to feel like you don't know how you're going to pay bills. And that is super alarming, especially if you have people dependent on you and you're paying for maybe loans or school or whatever else that you have. I also think the most surprising was because of the second time, both organizations had, as I mentioned earlier, like severance and payout plans, which you should be receiving. So hopefully you're not in a situation where you're laid off and that's that. Like, you should be receiving money after you've been laid off, like your normal paycheck, for a certain amount of time. That was the most surprising piece to learn about this experience, is how much time. One of the times this happened to me, I received pay for 6 weeks. The other time I received pay for 6 months.
Wow.
That's a huge difference, obviously, in giving someone a buffer and ability to, relaunch and find the next thing. So definitely that was surprising. And it's unfortunate because it's not something like a salary where you can negotiate. Obviously, you kind of just stuck with it, but hoping that your company supports you in that transition and that you do have a period of time in which you can find something new without worrying about your bank account.
Yeah. That's also something that no one talks about. Our severance packages. Yeah, it hasn't been talked about at any of the universities that I've worked for, even though I know layoffs have happened in the past. People say I've been laid off and it's this like huge devastating moment. Obviously, it doesn't always mean that you're just like left to the wolves. I think that's another reason that you can use to tell yourself to try and keep that anxiety lower and manage it if it's something you're anticipating, because you might not know what a company's going to offer you when you get laid off.
Absolutely. It's definitely not something that is talked about or even realized between the two. It was obviously shockingly different, the amount of time. And I will also say one of the times I was laid off, I was provided with like a career counseling service.
Whoa.
Yes, which is lovely because if you don't have access to that, luckily Elon University Student Professional Development Center gives alumni access to virtual meetings and job boards. However, if you don't have that access or just want more support, sometimes organizations will provide things like that, whether that's career service, severance pay, keeping you on health insurance. In addition to severance pay, organizations should hopefully also be providing your health insurance to continue for a certain period of time so that you can figure out whether you're going to apply to government benefits, to unemployment. There's definitely resources out there for you. And I think that is another very scary thing for a lot of people, losing access, especially if you have like a pre-existing condition or need to be seeing a professional more frequently.
Yeah. To close us out, again, I'm so thankful that you could come over and record this episode. I think it's going to be so helpful to everyone listening. The final question that I have for you is, what final advice do you have for our listeners who are currently going through this or who may be anticipating a layoff?
I'm very excited about the opportunity and hope that this reaches a lot of people because I definitely think I could have benefited the first time from knowing someone or hearing more about someone else's experience. I mean, I was thankful to have one other former coworker, but the more I talk with people about it that have also gone through it, I feel so much better. So I think the final piece of advice is to trust yourself and to know that your worth is not defined by a job, that you're so much more than your job. You have hobbies and interests and characteristics that make you uniquely you. And I think for a long time, I was just my identity was so sewn in with work. And I get it. We spent a lot of time there and it's nice to be proud of where you work and be close to people you work with, but you have a whole life outside of that. And we only work at places for so long. So to get too attached or to feel as if your life depends on it is a step too far. Obviously, wear the merch, be a proud member of the community of your team, but to take it to a point that becomes, unhealthy is very difficult. So I am sorry if anyone else listening has gone through that because it's a very difficult experience, but know that better things are ahead. You just kind of have to keep pushing along, chugging along.
Amen to that. Preach. Yeah. You are not your job. You are not your company. Your job is not your identity. You are so many different things. And where you work and what you do for a living is just one of them. Can
I just say that that's also something so specific about the DC area. As soon as you meet someone new,
yes,
as a friend, right? Not related to work, out at a volo kickball game, out at a bar, the first question you will always get is, where do you work? Because it's such a job market town. And I don't know if listeners, viewers from other places also experience this wherever they might live. Or maybe that's just being an adult, which sucks.
That really sucks.
Yeah, but it's so common here. And if you don't work at like one of the big four or in the government or, you know, somewhere that people assign as worthwhile or valuable, then you become less interesting to them. It's so fascinating. I don't know if you noticed this when you're out and about too.
Wait, can I tell you like a crazy story real quick? This will be going on the podcast. And I don't know why I haven't had the chance to talk about it yet. Someone who you might actually have met, one of our mutual friends, invited me to be a guest at a holiday party.
Oh.
And I also went to a holiday party with Rosalind. It was not that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So someone we know invited me to be a guest at the holiday party for their company. And I went to eat oysters with a couple of like high flying people. Really interesting situation. And also, that was a learning moment for me where I had to figure out how am I going to hold a glass of wine in one hand, eat oysters in the other hand, and also talk to these people who are like, are like really big names at the company where we were. And immediately they asked me what I did for a living. And I clearly made a good impression because I dressed to the nines for this holiday party because I knew the kinds of people I was going to be around. Sure. I wore a long black jumpsuit with like my best Calvin Klein black blazer and heels. Like I looked really good. And I clearly made a great first impression because they wanted to talk to me in the first place. The second I told them I was a career coach at a university, looked the other way, excluded me from the conversation, only talked to each other.
Wow.
Crazy. And also, literally, there was one person at that entire party who I felt comfortable around, and it was because they told me they liked the same kind of music as me. Once we started talking about something else that wasn't work.
Outside.
Because I'm like, come on.
Yeah, and it's so funny because as much as I sit here with you now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I have also been that person who, when you tell me where you work, and for some reason, society has told me that that is not valuable or of status, I have definitely in the past, and own up, to have assigned judgment to that.
Yeah.
And whether that's, you know, on a dating app and seeing someone who works at like a retail store or works part-time and doesn't have like a big flashy job or works construction, whatever it is, I've definitely assigned assumptions to that. And it's crazy to now have lived the other side.
Yeah.
And, you know, meeting new people when you don't have a job is like terrifying. You could obviously lie. You don't have to tell them that you were laid off. But I think being honest with them also proves like, can they hang? Will they respond in a way that makes you realize, nope, this is not the person for me? Because not everybody can just hear, oh yeah, like I'm in between jobs, and not assign judgment.
Right.
It's so hard to. So yeah, as long as, you know, they have the chance to grow and get more perspective. Yeah, it's such a job town.
Yeah. Yeah. There are so many skilled trades that make 4 times what I make. And I'm like, maybe I should have done that instead of go to college. Like, it's crazy.
It's definitely not about title or status or even money. I mean, those people who Erin was just speaking about at the holiday party, who knows if they were even happy with what they were doing? Like, they could be tip top of the company and making a gazillion dollars, but when they go to bed, like, do they feel satisfied? Are they happy with themselves? I think obviously a job is a job. You don't have to be saving the world or love what you do every minute, because there's going to be points where you're like, this isn't my favorite. But I think the majority of the time you should be happy and you should be content and comfortable. So,
well, Abby, this was so much fun. I'm so glad we got to do this. I had a blast, and I hope you did too.
I did.
And please reach out with any questions that you have. My email is careercomposerpodcast@gmail.com, but all of our contact information is in the show notes below. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time, and have a great day.